Story number 1. The Phantom of the Abyss. It was supposed to be the vacation of a lifetime. Emily and her friends had booked a week-long cruise on the luxurious liner the Seraphine, a ship renowned for its opulence and world-class amenities. They eagerly anticipated days filled with sun, sea, and relaxation. The first few days were everything they had hoped for, with endless buffets, exotic ports of call, and vibrant nightlife. On the fourth night, as the ship sailed into deeper, uncharted waters, a thick fog descended, blanketing the ocean in an impenetrable shroud. The once lively atmosphere turned eerie, with the fog muffling the sounds of the sea and the ship's engines. Despite the unsettling change, the passengers continued with their evening activities, comforted by the ship's warm, inviting interiors. Emily and her friends decided to explore the lower decks, drawn by rumors of an old, disused section of the ship that wasn't on the official tour. As they descended into the bowels of the vessel, the air grew colder and the lights dimmer. They eventually found themselves in a long, narrow corridor lined with rusted metal doors, each one more foreboding than the last. Ignoring their growing unease, they pressed on until they reached a door marked "Crew Only." With a mix of excitement and trepidation, they pushed it open and stepped inside. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the luxury above. A cold, sterile environment filled with dusty machinery and outdated equipment. As they ventured further, they stumbled upon an old logbook left on a metal table. Curiosity piqued, Emily flipped it open. The entries, dated decades earlier, detailed a series of mysterious disappearances and strange occurrences among the crew. The final entry, written in a frantic, barely legible scrawl, spoke of a phantom of the abyss that haunted the ship, dragging its victims into the depths of the ocean. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut behind them, and the lights flickered and went out. Panic set in as they fumbled in the dark, trying to find their way back. A low, haunting moan echoed through the room, sending chills down their spines. Emily's flashlight beam caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows, a ghostly figure, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The figure moved closer, its form becoming more distinct. It was a crew member, or what was left of one, his uniform tattered and his face a mask of torment. The ghostly crew member reached out, and the temperature dropped further, their breath visible in the freezing air. Emily and her friends backed away, but the apparition blocked their path, its hollow eyes fixed on them. Desperate to escape, they tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. The ghostly figure advanced, whispering in a language none of them understood. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling their minds with dread. In a final, desperate attempt, Emily swung her flashlight at the apparition, and it passed through harmlessly. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, the ship's emergency lights flickered on, and the door flew open. A security guard stood there, his face pale with shock. He had heard their screams and come to investigate. The ghostly figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind an icy chill and an overwhelming sense of dread. The friends were escorted back to their cabin, shaken but relieved to be alive. They reported their encounter, but the ship's crew dismissed it as a product of overactive imaginations in the eerie atmosphere created by the fog. However, Emily and her friends knew what they had seen and felt, the chilling presence of the phantom of the abyss. For the remainder of the cruise, they stayed away from the lower decks, their once joyous vacation marred by the encounter. They left the ship with a story that would haunt them forever, a tale of a luxury liner with a dark secret and the ghostly presence that lurked in the depths, waiting for its next victim. Story number 2. Echoes of the Drowned. The SS Pacific Star was known for its grand voyages and luxurious amenities, a floating palace that promised unforgettable memories. Sarah and her husband, David, had saved for years to embark on this dream cruise through the serene waters of the Caribbean. They boarded the ship with excitement, ready for a week of relaxation and adventure. The first few days were magical. They explored the ship, dined at gourmet restaurants, and danced under the stars. On the fourth night, the ship entered a region known among sailors as the Devil's Triangle, a place steeped in maritime legends and mystery. The weather turned unexpectedly, and a heavy fog enveloped the ship, casting an eerie silence over the usually bustling decks. Undeterred by the weather, Sarah and David decided to take a late-night stroll. As they wandered through the foggy corridors, they stumbled upon a part of the ship they hadn't seen before. A narrow staircase leading down to an old and used section of the vessel. Intrigued, they descended into the depths, the air growing colder with each step. They found themselves in a forgotten part of the ship, with rusted metal walls and flickering lights. The corridor was lined with cabin doors, each marked with a brass number. As they walked, they heard faint, echoing whispers, like distant voices carried by the wind. The whispers grew louder, and they realized they were not alone. From the shadows emerged a group of ghostly figures, their forms translucent and eyes hollow. These spectral passengers moved silently, their faces etched with expressions of sorrow and despair. Sarah and David watched in horror as the apparitions reenacted moments of panic and terror, as if trapped in a time loop of their final moments. One of the ghostly figures, a young woman with tears streaming down her pale cheeks, reached out to Sarah, her touch icy cold. The woman spoke in a hollow voice, telling them of the ship's dark past. Decades ago, the SS Pacific Star had been caught in a violent storm, and many passengers had drowned when a section of the ship flooded. Their souls had never found peace, forever trapped in the ship's haunted depths. The young woman begged for their help, her voice a haunting plea that echoed through the corridor. She explained that the only way to break the curse was to find and retrieve a locket lost in the flood, a keepsake that held the key to releasing their spirits. Despite their fear, Sarah and David agreed to help, driven by a mix of compassion and desperation to escape the haunted corridor. The young woman's spirit led them deeper into the bowels of the ship, to a flooded, decrepit cabin. The water was dark and murky, the air thick with the smell of decay. As they waded through the icy water, they felt unseen hands tugging at their clothes, heard the faint cries of the drowned echoing around them. Finally, they spotted the locket glinting faintly in the water. David reached down to retrieve it, but as he did, the ghostly figures surrounded them, their whispers turning into anguished cries. With the locket in hand, they raced back to the staircase, the spirits closing in around them. Reaching the top of the stairs, they found themselves back in the modern, bustling part of the ship. The fog had lifted, and the sun was beginning to rise. They hurried to the ship's chapel, placing the locket on the altar and saying a prayer for the lost souls. As they did, a sense of peace washed over them, and the air grew warmer. That night, they slept deeply for the first time since the fog had descended. In their dreams, they saw the young woman and the other spirits smiling, their forms dissolving into the light. When they awoke, they knew the curse had been lifted. Sarah and David never spoke of the nightmarish encounter again, but they carried the memory with them. The SS Pacific Star continued its voyages, but those who listened closely could still hear faint echoes of the drowned, a haunting reminder of the souls that had finally found peace. Story number 3. The Vanishing Deck. The majestic Horizon was the epitome of luxury cruising, promising its passengers an unforgettable journey across the Atlantic. On its latest voyage, among the thousands of guests, were Anna and her husband, Michael, celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary. They were excited for a week of relaxation and adventure on the high seas. The first few days were idyllic, filled with gourmet dining, sunbathing by the pool, and exploring the various entertainment options on board. On the fourth night, as the ship sailed into the open ocean far from any land, a thick, impenetrable fog rolled in, obscuring the stars and casting an eerie silence over the ship. That night, Anna and Michael attended a lavish masquerade ball in the grand ballroom. The fog outside gave the event a surreal, almost magical atmosphere. After hours of dancing and merriment, they decided to take a late-night walk on the promenade deck, hoping to enjoy the cool sea breeze. As they strolled along the deck, they noticed a door they hadn't seen before. It was slightly ajar, with a faint, flickering light emanating from within. Intrigued, they pushed it open and stepped inside, finding themselves in a narrow, dimly lit corridor lined with old, ornate doors. The air was colder here, and the distant sound of music from the ball faded into silence. The couple walked down the corridor, their curiosity piqued by the mysterious passageway. They reached the end of the hall, where a sign above the door read, "The Vanishing Deck." They hesitated for a moment, but, driven by a mix of curiosity and adventure, decided to step through the door. On the other side, they found themselves on a deck unlike any other on the ship. It was an open space, shrouded in fog, with a strange, ethereal glow illuminating the area. The deck was eerily empty, with only a few old, wooden deck chairs and tables scattered about. The air was filled with a haunting melody, a song that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. As they explored, they noticed ghostly figures appearing and disappearing in the fog. These apparitions were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their faces pale and expressionless. Anna and Michael tried to speak to them, but the figures seemed unaware of their presence, moving silently through the mist. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and the ghostly figures turned to face them, their hollow eyes filled with a silent plea. One of the apparitions, a young woman with a sorrowful expression, stepped forward. She reached out to Anna and Michael, her touch ice-cold, and began to speak in a whispery voice. She told them that they were trapped in a place between worlds, a deck that existed outside of time and space. Decades ago, during a storm, a section of the majestic horizon had mysteriously vanished, along with its passengers. Those who had disappeared were now lost souls, unable to find peace. The woman explained that the only way to escape was to find a key hidden somewhere on the deck, a key that would unlock the door back to the real world. Anna and Michael, terrified but determined, began searching the deck. The ghostly figures watched them, their eyes following their every move. The fog thickened, and the haunting melody grew louder, adding to the sense of urgency. After what felt like hours, they found an old, rusted key hidden under one of the deck chairs. With the key in hand, they hurried back to the door they had entered through. The young woman's ghost appeared again, pointing to the lock. Michael inserted the key and turned it, and the door swung open, revealing the familiar, warmly lit corridor of the majestic horizon. They stepped through, and the door slammed shut behind them. The temperature returned to normal, and the distant sound of the masquerade ball reached their ears once more. They looked back, but the door to the vanishing deck had disappeared, leaving only a blank wall. Shaken and exhausted, Anna and Michael made their way back to their cabin. They agreed never to speak of the night's events, fearing they wouldn't be believed. The rest of their cruise passed without incident, but the memory of the ghostly deck and its trapped souls haunted them long after they disembarked. The majestic horizon continued its voyages, its passengers unaware of the hidden deck and the lost souls it held. The legend of the vanishing deck became a whispered tale among the crew, a chilling reminder of the mysteries and dangers that lurked within the fog-shrouded waters of the open sea.